I hope these letters that I'm going to be sending you will give you some idea about what I'm doing. Here it is, the 15th of July, and I've been way too busy to write, sorry. But I did enjoy seeing everybody at my going away. The clubhouse sure did fill up. It was nice to see our old friends, the Divishes and the Kupkas, and it was also nice to have the Hibners and the Drinkas there as well. So Monday, as you know, we said goodbye, and I walked into the draft board office and started filling out the draft card. There was a reporter there from the Havre Daily News, so I suppose my name will be in the paper. I was off to Missoula, and there I was sworn into the Army at Camp Missoula, and they gave me a bunk to sleep in, just like I was in the real Army. Like a lot of guys, I got to thinking about how caught up I am in the patriotism and the fever of the country, and I guess there's a lot of us like that. I understood that Schnickelgruber was the last name of Adolf Hitler, the real name of that guy. Well, the next day I was loaded onto a train for Camp Lewis, Washington. Camp Lewis is a huge base. There must be 500 or more buildings there. I understand it's spread all over the place. Somebody said probably covers 68,000 acres south of Seattle and east of Tacoma. Most of those acreage board the training field, so I don't get out into it any. And then I got my usual Army haircut, really a head shave is what it is. I also got a careful medical inspection. My platoon of 26 guys is learning to get along together throughout all of it. Our day is made up of this kind of physical training. We have to follow commands, and we practice the same basic skills over and over again: attacking, bodybuilding, getting to know our weapons forward and backward. The drill instructors use some pretty tough methods to force us to become attentive to detail and protocol. We also learn some really tough tactics to person. They want us to act like a part of a unit, a lot like combining. Everyone pitches in and to get the job done. Things are moving fast, but some things are not. We don't have rifles yet. We're given sticks shaped like rifles. Some platoons have to use beer cans as grenades. For 5.5 days, this goes on, and if we have performed satisfactorily and passed the Saturday morning inspection, we are awarded a 36-hour pass over the weekend. I'll tell you a little more about our first trip to Seattle when I get my first leave. Here it is, the 3rd of August, and I'm wondering how our little saint is doing on her 29th birthday. I sure do miss you, and hope that the convent will throw a big party for you. I'm afraid, Sister Marietta, that the conduct in my barracks would not be kind to your ears. There are some pretty wild guys living here. But one of my best buddies is Emil Bitar. He's a tall guy, always smiling, and has such a positive attitude about everything. His dad came from the old country as well as mine. Well, basic training is no picnic. We often march and march some more and then stand on the drill grounds for whatever reason. Standing in full-dress battle gear is exhausting, believe it or not. We not only do a lot of physical training, but we're practicing with our gear on top of all of that. We're starting to do some amphibious landing exercises. September the 10th. I sure do miss you, Angie, especially on your birthday. We had some great adventures around Hingham, didn't we? Now that you're a big 24 years of age, you probably don't remember them. Well, I'm all done with basic, and I sent everyone a photo showing me in my dress uniform. The upper lapel pin is a crossed carbine on one side indicating I'm a foot soldier in the infantry. The pin on the other lapel is a reminder that I represent the United States of America. The lower pin, they're colored, and they indicate I'm a member of the 15th Infantry Regiment. That makes me one among 1,000 to 2,000 men in that group. The pin on my hat signifies that I am employed by the United States government. I feel pretty good about taking on the enemy now. November 12th, 1941. Our battalion practiced loading onto landing boats, proceeding to a rendezvous point, and then returning to the pier for unloading. There's a lot of water around here, and it's quite a shock for this old farm boy. I do know a boy who's going to be 11 soon. I hope he never has to go to war. What will you do with your life, Leonard? I hope you become as good a farmer as your dad. Here it is, the 14th day of December, and I can't tell you much because of tough security restrictions. I found a way around all the censorship boys, so this stuff I'm writing you, keep it hush-hush. Some of us guys were in Tacoma last Saturday when we heard everyone shouting the news. We were all informed. Every one of us soldiers had to return to the base immediately. No more leaves off this base. Lots of barbed wire was strung up around the entrances. The perimeter of the entire base has guards posted. We were instructed to erect anti-aircraft guns in our training range. That's something we're going to need to do in amphibious landing? I don't know. Anyway, we have to wear our full battle gear daily now because we don't know where the Japs are or their spies might be, and we may be called on to fight. There's a lot of tenseness in the barracks at times. 22nd of December. This birthday greeting is going to come a little late for you, John, but I'm trying to fight loneliness, and I don't think I'll ever forget that great party we had when you turned 35. Your boys were having fun pulling pranks on you, and that little girl of yours was just giggling right along with them. 21st of January. Our battalions trained for 2 weeks in San Diego with Amphibious Corps Pacific Fleet. This entailed landing and disembarkation practices. We are getting better at getting off of the boats and into the carts that carry us into the beach. And we're also practicing getting off of boats by climbing down a cargo net into the side of the ship and dropping onto the landing craft. 4th of February. Thanks for the birthday card, Angie, and a nice message. I was surprised. I've been so busy I had forgotten all about my own birthday. Have you been battling the snow in Havre? It's been a wet and chilly winter here at Fort Lewis. We just had a name change. We're now called Fort Lewis, and new men are pouring in all the time. Everybody's getting ready to do battle with the enemy. February 15th. Our entire regiment has been assigned the duty of defending the Washington coastline from Seattle to Canada. We've been doing landing practices for a few months out in Puget Sound. Trying to navigate that cargo rope with full battle pack is no fun. Last week we took defensive action around industrial plants and communications north of Seattle to the Canadian border. It's nice to have dry feet at the end of the day. Standing watch is a whole lot better than climbing down a rope net. Orders were given a couple of days ago. We were to proceed to prepare to move to Fort Ord, California before going overseas. A few days later, a change would take place. The move would be a permanent one for training purposes. The buzz around the barracks is that soldiers needed to receive additional training to become combat ready. That's kind of funny because we have been prepared to take on the enemy with all the work we've been doing up at Camp Lewis. But I understand Fort Ord is a beautiful base. The 6th of April. Well, we're still at Fort Lewis a month and a half later. But today, the entire 15th Infantry turned out on Army Day to march in a parade in Seattle. The crowd loved us. We demonstrated weapons, and I think we impressed the citizens that we are ready to defeat the Japanese. The 23rd, our infantry, the 3rd Infantry Division, was notified again that we're going to move to Fort Ord. And again, and a rumor, at least, was by early August, and possibly our mission would be the Atlantic, not the Pacific. The Japs are going to have to be a mission of someone else. Our amphibious training has increased in complexity. There's almost a chaos every time we have to go through this. 17th of May. That's your big day, Larry. I'm sorry I have to miss it. But I want to wish you a happy birthday anyway. I sent a little note along here telling you just what's going on, and pretty proud of you because you've made it through the 1st grade, I'm sure. But you got to remember that they get a little tougher the older you get. And I know you're going to do well. But just send me your grades so that I can brag on you. Here it is, the 30th of June, and I want to send a happy birthday to Marion. I'll bet you didn't think I'd remember your birthday. We don't have a lot of time on our hands, so our minds do kind of wander in the wrong direction, but I could not forget yours. With 3 little ones keeping you busy, I'll bet Newt and Jim step right up to help. I miss you. Please pray for me. 3rd of August. Happy birthday again, Sister Marietta. Time has flown by, but it seems so nice to have a nun in the family praying for my safety, especially one that's my own sister. It is comforting to know that whatever lies ahead in the war, your prayers will shelter. Prayers to our God will shelter me. Well, the division began our move today on September 6th. The railroads dug out a lot of their retired sleeping cars, and in the worst heat of summer, they installed 3 bunks high. This is going to be one long trip to the East Coast, with only rumors as to our eventual destination. It was to be a secret move. However, at every station we stopped for refueling, we were greeted by hundreds of cheering people. Some of the cheerers were friends of the men, good friends it appears, they had made before the men left base. Well, Fort Ord is Fort Pickett is one huge base. I read where there are 1,000 barracks for enlisted men, 70 officers' quarters, another 400 various buildings like 12 chapels and a post hospital and 6 firehouses, and there are warehouses and headquarters and administrative facilities, and the barracks. Boy, they are crowded. During these past 3 weeks here at Fort Pickett, Virginia, we've been loaded onto transports and steamed up to Chesapeake Bay, landed, reboarded, and returned. Some of the men were allowed into D.C. for a few hours to tour around the wall and perhaps entertain the congressman. All our physical exams and immunizations have been taking place during the month. We have no idea what's going to happen next. Here it is on the 9th, and I just finished a letter to John, and I wanted to tell him how bothered I was by people reading personal letters, so I snuck this one off. I'm thinking we won't be here at Camp Pickett long. We're getting some pretty secret stuff, I understand. What do you know about Brother Frank? Well, I had to quit writing there for a while. I had an inspection again, and I'll be able to finish the letter now. Glad to know that you're done with harvest, and I can't think much more to say. I wondered how Sister was been doing, if you'd heard from her. I also sent off a special birthday wish to Bob. I'm sure that he's putting up with a lot of stuff, but when we get back to Montana, we're going to have to go out and shoot some gophers. Camp Pickett, Virginia. Right across the bay is this location called Hampton Roads. We waited in the train and watched the placement of all the supplies into our ship. Once we unloaded from the train and started toward the ship, I saw more ships out there than I'd ever imagined possible. Battleships, aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, and even tugboats. I think our convoy is composed of nearly 80 transports, and then a bunch of warships. There was a long wait after unloading from the trains, long lines. We had to get our names checked off the sailing list, and then a long line getting up into the ship and waiting forever to find my bunk in that hot, moist troop compartments. And to top it all off, nobody knows where we're going. Saturday, the 24th of October. Well, we finally pulled out of port today. I overheard a couple of officers talking about the bunch of ships. It seems like there are about 102 ships carrying nearly 35,000 officers and enlisted men. I have already spotted 3 battleships, and it looks like maybe 4 or 5 aircraft carriers. They are so big, they're hard to miss. And I don't know how many cruisers are out there, some larger than others. The sea is just scattered, mile after mile, with ships all over the place. Because it is such a top-secret mission, we don't expect any problems with the German submarines. They usually have been doing their damage in the North Atlantic, knocking out our merchant ships and sinking the British ships as well. But just to make certain, we're taking a zigzag course, only going straight ahead at night. There's been a lot of talk about where we're going here on the 25th of October, but we understand now we're going to be going to North Africa. That was a bit of a surprise, because most of the rumors were talked about were Europe. One officer was overheard talking about Morocco as a destination. One of my buddies said he knew all about Morocco, and all it was mountains and deserts. We were given a book, North Africa, for all members of the United States Expeditionary Forces. In places, it appealed to the proper conduct of us as visitors. It would be, therefore, most harmful if, as a representative of the United States, you behaved in a manner that might be interpreted as unfriendly or arrogant. I guess that means we have to be kind to the Arabs. It appears we're headed this way because the British need some help knocking Rommel out of North Africa. There might be a problem even getting there because of the U-boats. That's the name given a German submarine. They're all over the eastern Atlantic, and some are bound to be down where we're headed. While we were loading, I didn't realize the ships had already been packed with supplies for a few days on shore. Our first few days, we get 10 days of rations plus 2 days of K-rations to be carried by each individual on board. 1 5-gallon container of water per man was placed on board. 7 days of motor fuel for bulldozers and others were placed on board. Also 5 units of fire for all weapons, 10 days of medical supplies for all units, and 7 days' supply of ordnance cleaning and preserving materials and spare gun parts. Here it is, Thursday, the 5th of November, and it has been some time since I've written. Things have been kind of monotonous on the ship. kind of close quarters. But last night we found out that the U-boats are on our trail. Some depth charges went off during the night, and then all was quiet. When those charges went off, the whole ship shudders or quivers for a moment. It's a pretty discomforting feeling. But maybe we got some. Our ship is the USS Joseph Hughes. It was a former passenger liner, the SS Excalibur. It sailed in the Mediterranean in the 1930s. Large decks had the ultimate in comfort fittings in the 30s. Onboard passengers could be assured of sublime luxury. Elegance abounded, according to the pictures I'd seen of the ship. Spacious decks with appropriate furnishings, staterooms that were tastefully decorated. But she was redesignated APA 50 by the U.S. Navy. A new paint job was applied, and she was fitted with polar radar, that mast there on top of the bridge, 2 forward 3-inch guns, or 50-millimeter guns, on the main deck behind the bulwark. Things changed when she was commissioned by the U.S. Navy. There are 80 officers and 1,074 men of the U.S. Army 3rd Division on board. Running at 16 knots, we're able to outrun the U-boats. We are the smaller ship. Sailors tell us we're pretty fortunate to be aboard this rather than the troop transport. Our bunks are much more roomy than those on the troop transports. November 9th. Well, we finally made it. What a day. We traveled more than 3,400 miles across the Atlantic. Our purpose was to capture the large city of Casablanca, the largest port on the west coast of Africa. To accomplish this mission, the various troops were directed to land on beaches in the vicinity of Fadalia. That's a small port that's about 16 miles northeast of Casablanca. We're to seize that as a temporary base of operation and then attack toward Casablanca. We sat in the ship in the morning while 2 other divisions went ashore to take control of the beach defenses and to prepare for advancement into Casablanca. Those defenses were not giving up very easily. They seemed to be ready for us. But I think we did gain control of the beach. There was lots of fireworks between our ships and the warships operated by the French sympathizers with the Germans. The Wildcats off of the aircraft carrier Ranger were a big help. Then the 7th Infantry went ashore, followed by more and more landing craft. There was heavy surf and a terrific undertow that no one realized was there until too late. As I watched from the ship this morning, I didn't think we would have enough equipment or men left alive to take on an army that awaited us in Fadala or Casablanca. Some crashed against the rocky bluffs, drowning troops, destroying equipment. Many landing crafts that were carrying U.S. troops to the beach were sunk or badly damaged. But most of the men from the 7th and 30th Infantry made it in on shore and achieved the first goal of silencing the beach defenses. My landing ashore was lucky. There were 57 of the 119 boats in the first wave that were lost. By noon, we landed as the division's reserve regiment. We were ordered to stop any resistance in the small town of Fadala, prepared to pass inland on the left of the 7th Infantry, and in company with the latter, take up the drive into Casablanca. The citizens of Fadala allowed our street regiments to move freely and to secure the port. That was a relief. We could now start to unload jeeps and trucks and tanks. And it sure felt good being on good old solid land again. The terrain between Fadala and Casablanca is gently rolling, largely cultivated, ideal for motorized and mechanized equipment since there's a good network of roads and trails. Here it is, the 10th, and we're ready to head toward Casablanca, 15 miles away, along with that 7th Infantry. But we were stopped by reconnaissance, reporting a large number of French troops ahead. So we waited until daybreak, and then we had a firefight with the enemy. In the early morning hours, as we were headed to Casablanca, there's a little crossroads there, patch of huts called Titmalel, and there we had contact with the French. Our ships were busy lobbing shells back at their ships, and their ships were also sending armament our way as well. And we had the small arms fire from the French Vichy. The whistle of those mortars are something that's a scary thing. We had probably going to have a lot more of that sort of thing. And it got to be pretty tough fight. Several of my buddies were killed in this battle, and at times I felt like the next bullet might be mine. The shrapnel that is used is deadly. The jagged metal tears away at the flesh. It crushes the bone beneath. It's an ugly sight to see a buddy beside you, and 1 second later, he's lying there, blood gushing out, screaming in pain. Our 81st mortars finally silenced them, and we were eventually able to continue toward Casablanca. But we had to halt the march at about 11 in the morning. We'd run out of food and armored backup. Those could not be unloaded from our ships because of the treacherous water conditions. Coastal defenses were knocked out, so the unloading was easier. But they had to be unloaded at the pier in Fadala, which was a small port. We were told the march would probably continue about midnight, and then we should be fully combat ready. The rest was appreciated. We were carrying heavy machine guns, lots of ammo, along with our 70-pound packs on our back. Many of us were carrying mortars and equally heavy shells, something the trucks were to carry once they were unloaded from the ships. Some random machine gun fire, artillery, and rifle fire was experienced about midday, but our battalion gained the high ground and silenced the fire. Later in the day, an armistice was established, so the city didn't have to be forcibly taken. In fact, one of our squads helped the French clear landmines leading into the city, so generals from both armies could meet there to finalize the armistice. We didn't have to fire a shot that afternoon, but it was a bloody morning. 36 killed, 113 wounded. Thank the Lord I'm still alive. November 11th. We were ready to advance into the city with all the striking power we had brought from the States. We were ready for a big fight. It's a huge city, very large city. During the night, the French sought this armistice, so we stopped our advance, and their guns went silent as well. Thank goodness we didn't have to destroy that city. Of the city itself, I have never seen a more beautiful place. Much of it is very modern, with wide streets and many French cars on them. The buildings seem to be all tan in color, or at least 2 or 3 stories high, with very solid walls. I imagine they're made out of brick or rock. Everything seems new in appearance. They tell me that the older section is quite the opposite. Instead of all the bright streets and wide avenues, we find you're taking your life into your hands to wander into that section. It is a huge city. It seems to have all the conveniences we enjoy in the good old U.S. of A. I've heard there's even a Shell gas station next to a big new movie theater. One of our officers talked about the great number of movie theaters that line the modern streets. He said there were 29 movie theaters in Casablanca. He talked about the Rialto as one of the larger. It holds more than 2,000 viewers. Some of the smaller ones may only hold less than 200. The rolling hills in the back of the city were barren of trees but green with grass. In the distance were garden patches. All in all, The effect was enough to make a land-loving boy want to go for a walk over there where the large farms could be seen. The 12th of November, and here is when I heard that there were 4 of our ships were torpedoed. We lost several men who were unloading our arms and supplies. In fact, the good old friend of ours, the Joseph Hughes, was one of those. They had loaded about 30 wounded GIs and were started to leave when it happened. I also found out today that this invasion was entitled Torch, and most officers felt it was successful. I don't know what the Havre Daily News is saying about us, but I hope it says that warfare is not fun. Sunday, November 29th. These past few weeks I've been busy. I've been pulling guard duty around the port because some of our transports have not been unloaded yet. It's a very busy area. Ships from all over arrive, dump their cargo, load up more cargo, and leave. There were a bunch of our transports bringing us supplies on the 14th. I guess I never thought it was necessary to take care of 35,000 troops. It's like starting a city with nothing but the ground under your feet. We haven't even had to transport our drinking water from the States until a secure water source could be established. We could not expect to use anything when we landed. Food, medicine, clothing, everything had to be brought with us. But the temperature here in Casablanca has been comfortable. It gets in the upper 60s and lower 70s during the day, and in the mid-50s at night. This seems to be a very French city, according to some of my buddies who've been around. Many modern buildings exist away from the port, and I'm surprised at the very fashionable dress that nearly everyone wears. But in the many other sections, there are lots of Arabs who still dress in their traditional robes, creating quite a contrast on the streets. I've got some good stories to tell you about French food and women, Leonard. These stories will have to wait till I'm home on leave. Have yourself a great big piece of birthday cake for me on your day. Now that you're 13, I know that you're going to be a big help to your dad. Sunday the 6th of December. Yesterday we were trucked to Rabat, about 54 miles or 87 kilometers away. We're gradually getting used to kilometers. That's their form of measuring distance here in North Africa. Rabat is a coastal city, their capital, so it too has many modern new buildings, but there are plenty of old historic buildings built of stone. Their settlement started in the 12th century when a sultan established a fortress, or they call it a kasbah, here so his ships could raid and harass Spain. A large portion of the city reflects modern French design, broad streets, plenty of trees and flowers. The contrast between the walls and the buildings, hundreds of years old, and the modern ones next to them is pretty shocking. A later ruler began construction on what was to be the largest mosque in the world. Today, only some broken columns exist to remind us it was never completed. The only thing completed was their prayer tower. We are bivouacked outside of town a few miles. Some of us have explored the downtown section that I've described to you. It seems like probably prostitution is the major industry here. If women didn't have their faces pretty well covered, you knew how they made a living. It's Sunday, the 20th of December, and a special day for us. Our division, as well as an armored division and the French troops, marched through downtown Rabat. We had large cheering crowds that made me feel safe and proud to be an American. John, you would not believe the ancient tools they used to farm with around here. I would bring you back some for you as a birthday present, but my duffel bag isn't that big. At any rate, have a happy birthday. Well, here it was, Christmas Day. I wrote off a letter to John and Marion. Finally, no landing exercises going on. I wrote, able to tell them where I was, finally. Can't tell them much in these letters. And I couldn't help but bragging on how I didn't get sick as we crossed the Atlantic. And I also wrote off a note to Sister Marietta and one to Angie as well. It's pretty hard on a day like today, hard being so far away and missing everybody painfully. I hope you write soon to me and pray for me. New Year's Day. Well, there's no New Year's Eve dances here at Rabat last night. I missed those Goldstone Hall dances. There were always good bands, and the Red Yard and Hingham girls, they all knew how to do the most modern dances. John, what do you hear from our flyboy brother? I've only received one brief note in a couple of months. The Air Force is building up around here lately. And some buddies and I went into Rabat and saw some pretty interesting sights. First thing we did was caught a train rather than using a jeep. That train ride was quite an experience. We got a chance to meet a few English-speaking citizens and visit about events of the day. Then we visited some stores, if you could call them that. I saw some places that were packed, worse than Mike Warhank's store. The streets are much different than even in Havre. They use lots of awnings because of the intense sun of the summer, I'm told, and the streets twist and curve and snake through the area, indicating that it is an old city. Then we saw an interesting sight. We spotted a Navy captain with a French girl. They were quite a sight for that citizens. They couldn't take their eyes off of that pair. Some of the shops we saw were small. They're way too small to even enter. We saw a tailor working on the sidewalk, and behind him was a closet where he stocked his fabrics. As we moved along, we got into the market area, and there, sure enough, this international pair was being entertained. And again, there was a crowd of citizenry intrigued with what they were seeing. This was fascinating because of the music that was being played. Violins providing a screech and a whine to add to that Arabic music. It was getting late, so we thought we better get back, and we almost got lost because of the twisting, curving streets. I doubt I'll ever forget Morocco. Friday the 21st, we had a big surprise. The President of the United States, Franklin Roosevelt, arrived in North Africa and reviewed our troops. He rode in an ordinary jeep, and we all lined up along the mile that he traveled. He wore a black band around his left arm in mourning for his mother, who had died recently. He spoke to some of my platoon as he passed. We were pretty proud because the driver was from the 3rd Infantry Division. And some of my buddies worked in the mess hall where the president ate with the troops. We're all pretty sure that we're going to be headed for either Sardinia or Sicily, and there's some talk maybe even Greece. That would drain off the German soldiers from the Russian front. Stalin would be happy to get rid of those Jerrys. Saturday, the 30th of January, there was a funeral for the first American chaplain killed. He died on the beach with the first GIs to land. So First Lieutenant Clement Follier was honored in this beautiful cathedral in Rabat. St. Peter's is an extremely modern structure, and walking inside, you're amazed at all of the beautiful stained glass, all very modern. I'm surprised that there are that many Catholics around that can afford such a lavish interior. Because when you're in the city, everywhere you look, there are long gowns and either white turbans for the men or pieces of cloth around the heads and veils of the women. There must be a sizable number of French Catholics living in Rabat to be able to afford all of this in that magnificent structure. February 2, Tuesday. The entire 3rd Infantry Division is going to be shipped off to Tunisia to stop the advance of Rommel's African Corps. But don't exactly know when. This, again, is a common problem among us GIs. We're supposed to be headed for Azuz, just outside of Orange, to do some more amphibious training. I guess my 27th birthday party tomorrow will be in the back of a truck headed toward the Germans. Don't get the idea that we're surrounded by warm winds and summer temperatures. It is cold here, freezing cold at times. It's been in the low 40s and upper 30s at night, and in the 60s during the day. What makes it so bad is that humidity. It's oppressive. I don't remember what a dry breeze is. It is usually cloudy most days, and I'm not sure that you're going to even get this letter, because I'm not sure when I can even write again. But I didn't want to forget my beautiful niece Alice's birthday. I'm sure you're getting the best grades in school, and I sure miss all of you. February 24th, Wednesday. We just got word of the defeat at Kasserine Pass in Tunisia. The Second Corps took one heck of a beating. They suffered the worst defeat that America has known in all of North Africa. 6,000 dead, hundreds missing, many probably in prisoner of war camps now. The territory that we tried to conquer was perfect for his tanks, and they could not be stopped. I expect the Third Army is going to be headed toward Rommel and his tanks and see what kind of damage we can do to him. Here on Saturday, the 6th of March, we got a change of command. General Lucien K. Truscott took over the training as well. He instituted a tough training regime and ensured that all ranks in the division could march 5 miles in 1 hour, followed by 4 miles the hour afterwards, then back again to 5 miles. The troops call it the Truscott Trot. We also did obstacle course training, log throwing, swimming, bayonet training, hand-to-hand combat again. It was the most intensive, difficult, and tiring training I've experienced in my life. It went on almost non-stop. There were several men in my battalion that didn't make it. They washed out and were sent back to the camp. I'll take shoveling wheat into a grain bin all day long, any time. We did get some training on the types of German and Italian landmines. We also even had some more dangerous training. Besides trying to uncover a landmine, we had to work through a piece of terrain with live mortar and machine gun fire overhead and around us. I saw one soldier get cut down by a machine gun blast because he didn't follow the directions correctly. Division began intensive training in amphibious landing operations, just like we had never known anything like that in the Pacific. The 15th of March. The 15th Infantry moved to the 5th Army Division Training Center at Arzuz. We moved to Port au Pelouse, near Arzuz, to begin our amphibious training there. It seemed like endless loading on and loading off of every type of landing craft the Navy possessed. So all that physical training is paying off. Some of the men decided to go into the city, the town as it is, and discovered that it was noted for its medicinal waters. Most of us have had enough water. We didn't care to go to the beach. In another couple days, it's going to be Newt's big day, I know. 10 years old and still as ornery as ever, I'll bet. Have a happy day there, Newt. Palm Sunday. Every day we watch our bombers and their escorts head north to Sardinia or Sicily. In the morning it seems like an endless roar of planes go on for hours. Then they return in the late afternoon with the same roar. Sadly, a few do not return. It appears we're bombing every airfield, railroad marshalling center, every port and ship found around Sicily. Millions of bombs must be doing some damage. We seldom see the Luftwaffe anymore. I'm going to remember all those airmen during Mass this morning. 2nd of May. Yesterday we got our orders to move to Tunisia. We have to be prepared to attack the lingering parts of the Africa Corps. Our bombers have been eliminating the airfields that the enemy's been using. The Second Corps are driving the enemy toward the sea. A pincer action is going to finish off the enemy. Rommel's army is being forced up into the sea, and he has no ships to transport them away. They have to surrender. It was interesting watching the British, the Canadian, the Australian, and even troops from India overwhelm the enemy. We are jammed up on the roads because so many trucks are headed there and many more are bringing back prisoners. That gave me time to write off this letter to you. Here it is, the 7th of May. Got a little time on my hands, and to tell you a little about what we're doing. We were ordered to head to the front and to drive the Germans off the strategic high ground. But before we arrived at the staging area, the Germans surrendered. Many of these Germans are young boys, scared for their lives. They'd been told by their superiors that if they were captured, they would be castrated by the Americans. Many of those who surrendered were tired of fighting for Hitler in this terrible desert. Most of them were delighted to leave North Africa. Every Italian who surrendered seemed to be grinning, delighted to be finished with fighting. They were looking forward to being shipped to prisoner of war camps in the United States. One officer said they could be going to Camp Missoula in Montana. Later in the day, the Second Army Corps captured Bizerti. North Africa was in Allied hands. We are bivouacked away from Bizerti. It is nothing but rubble. Not a single building is livable in Bizerti, I don't think. I guess the world knows now that we were victorious in North Africa. But we're freezing to death because we don't have enough warm clothing. And the German planes are out of Sicily again on a daily affair. Our anti-aircraft guns can't keep them away every day. Some do slip through. One week alone, 250 soldiers were killed right here near the base. I've ducked enough times now, but continue to pray for me. Sunday, the 9th of May. In gathering prisoners, there was no fear of losing them. Besides being cold and hungry, there were miles and miles of desert that would have finished them off. I think we have more prisoners than we can ever handle. They continued surrendering this morning as well. The 3rd Infantry didn't get to fire a shot at them. Instead, we're in charge of the prisoners of war that are captured. We seem to have about 38,000 prisoners gathered in the last 4 days of the war here in North Africa. Almost 250,000 Axis soldiers became prisoners of war during the North African campaign, and they're being shipped to the United States to be well aware that there is no way they can fight any longer. A lot of us are ready to fight, but we're sitting here freezing and often pretty hungry. Dysentery, trench foot, bad teeth are all over the place. Living out in the open like we are, this is not fighting a war. I know of 2 of my buddies who were going crazy. They were pulled out of the unit and are probably going to end up stateside in an asylum. The supply trains bringing us clothing and food are slow to arrive from Casablanca. The sea rations that we do have a few of are few and far between. Sea rations come in a 5 by 10-inch box with food for one person for 3 meals. They usually consist of 3 different cans. One of eggs and ham, another of pork and beans, and finally beef and beans. There is 1 can with gumdrops and 2 cookies. Then there's packets of dried coffee, a tiny jar of jam, a bar of cocoa, and some dried cream. 1 battalion was eating cracked wheat and condensed milk boiled together with 2 lifesavers. Usually there's nothing warm to eat. I've heard that some soldiers were shooting cattle and grilling them away from officers' eyes. 15th of May, Saturday. Happy birthday, John and Lawrence. I sure miss you little buggers. John, I don't imagine you're little anymore. At 16, you're probably thinking about the war effort. I hope you can stay at home to help your dad run the farm. But if you're drafted, pray, and pray hard that you pull something behind the lines. Lawrence, sounds like you're really enjoying school. Too bad it's going to be over soon. We had to return to amphibious training, this time in the Jemaps and Phillipsville area. We're going to be doing that northwest of Jemaps at a place called Skiddaw. I was selected to join the unit to assault the beach. The beach here is like a resort, nothing like Fadala. There's all that soft sand, no rocks above or below the surface to tear up our boats. You know, being the first to touch down on enemy soil may sound romantic, but not to me. We think the beaches are going to be pretty well defended. We don't quite know where those beaches might be. Sardinia, Greece, Sicily, that's also in the rumors. It should be no surprise that there are thousands upon thousands of soldiers swarming North Africa. German and Italian planes fly over at times, gathering intelligence about what's happening beneath. And some never return to their bases, however. Here it is, the 7th of June already. We left Jemaps in Algeria, and the entire division moved to El Aliyah near Bizerti. Bizerti was the ancient Uzalis in the Roman province of Africa Proconsularis. Its current name comes from a founder in the Middle Ages, Ali el-Biglait. There are still some Roman ruins scattered throughout the city. We find some especially in the outskirts of the city. They've been preserved. The population there is largely composed of the descendants of the Andalusians who fled Spain after this Christian reconquest. Andalusian architecture has left its mark on the ancient city there on top of the hill. But there isn't much left after our bombers drove out the Germans and most of the residents. The city does not appear to have any window glass left in it. Bombing is an ugly but an efficient way to wage a war. I just hate seeing it. More and more troops are appearing here every day. The reason, many GIs think, is that they brought peace to North Africa. They fought the Germans and the Italians until they surrendered. So they're going to be replaced, and they'll be going home. Somebody's got a surprise. My division is preparing for a landing somewhere, and my guess is across the Mediterranean to Sicily. Going to defeat the Italians and drive the Germans back into their homeland. What is this I hear about another boy at your house, Marion? What did you name him? I've heard some interesting names here in North Africa. How about Amir or Hamza? How does Bilal Chvilicek sound? Rafik is a nice name, too. June 21st. Hey, Jimmy, happy birthday to you. At 14 years of age, be thankful you're too young to go to war. Hopefully you won't have to, because of GIs like us who are going to drive those Germans back to where they belong. More and more troops are being trucked in, swelling our ranks as we are stretched across the desert. We're all guessing again about the next destination. Wherever we go from here, there is one problem, and that is Pantelleria, that island in the middle of the Mediterranean that is loaded with air bases and submarine ports. We do know that our bombers and escorts filling the sky daily. We've heard they're dropping thousands of tons of bombs on the island. I imagine by now fewer and fewer enemy planes are going to be flying out of there. Their planes are stored in man-made caves, but they can't fly out of there with a destroyed airstrip. If this keeps up, there won't be much left of that island, I'm afraid. Once it is safe for sea travel, I'll be glad to get off of this desert. My guess is Sicily is where we're going to be headed. Many of the doughboys, a strange name for men willing to give up their lives, are of Italian descent, from that triangular-shaped island. We know they are delighted, looking forward to ridding their families of Mussolini's rule. Some from our company have been called to serve in a secret group. I think their fluency in the language is why. It is a language that's much easier on the ears than Arabic. We've been asked not to send letters for the next couple of weeks. We are headed for something big. 5th of July, no parades or speeches yesterday here in this foreign land. The 1st Infantry has joined us here in Bizerti as ships are arriving, ready to whisk us off to Sicily. It's only about 100 miles away, but it will take a few days to arrive, I've been told. We are going to be a part of the 7th Army, and the British are sending the 8th Army to Sicily as well. Bizerti is a mess. No one needs to ask for a leave pass. There is nothing but destroyed buildings and hungry beggars. It looks like every building in town has at least lost its windows, and some even their roofs. I understand why the British 8th Army will be headed for Sicily as well. They've been pretty badly beat up by the Germans as they pushed them out of Egypt across the West Desert. The 8th of July. Adding to all the chaos in Bizerti with what seems like 10,000 soldiers trying to load onto troop carriers, it's creating quite a mess. I guess some divisions are not quite as disciplined as we are. Then there were things like this. Some men from an engineering battalion dropped 8-ounce blocks of TNT into Lake Bizerti, providing enough fish to feed 200 officers. An ammunition dump caught on fire, jumped the fire break, and set off 2,000 tons of munitions. Some men were dropped off in the wrong ship and got lost aboard it. There were little or no order around the port. But I'm going to be aboard a new troop carrier, an LCI, Landing Craft Infantry. They can pull right up to the beach. 2 front gangplanks drop down, and we walk right onto the beach ready to fight. Leonard, you thought our combine was big? You can't imagine how huge this thing is. It could hold 200 of our combines. But it is more cramped in quarters than the Joseph Hughes were. There are 200 of us, our officers. Their bunks are only 2 high, and they sleep on canvas instead of pipes. But who can sleep? It's miserable. This boat has a flat bottom, so it rocks and rolls and pitches every second of the day and night. Everyone, including myself, gets sick pretty regularly. Sometimes, if I'm lucky, I can get to the rail. Otherwise, I got to carry a bag around. After dark, all the lights are out, no smoking. Each of us received a battle dressing kit and sulfa powder. Just another thing to load into our 82-pound backpack. That weight includes 10-pound rifle we're carrying. We each received the Soldier's Guide to Sicily to prepare us for what to expect. It was pretty dismal reading. Today, 40% of the people are still illiterate, compared with 20% on the mainland. In the main centers, 1/3 live in crowded and 1/2 in overcrowded conditions. 2 houses out of 3 are without drinking water laid on, and only about 1/2 of these houses have any sanitation. Well, July 8th, thinking about before we left North Africa, our LSC was surrounded by 2,500 and seemed like 89 other ships of all descriptions. It was a rare moment that I was able to visit with a high-ranking naval officer. He said besides all the men that these ships were carrying, there was more than 100,000 tons of supplies, everything from 2,000 tanks and 5,000 tons of crated airplanes to 19,000 tons of signal equipment and 6.6 million rations. A terrible windstorm tossed us around like three pigs in the back of a truck on the last day and a half. I joined a number of them, praying to God to take us right now. That seasickness stuff they gave us does not work. I didn't think I'd live to stay alive on this ship. It's probably been the most miserable days of my entire life. We get tossed out of our bunk by the heavy tossing and rocking of the ship. But we have just halted. We must be within sight of Italy and won't proceed until dark. I'll say good night to everyone, and please pray for me. Here it is, the 9th of July, Friday. Last night I thought we were near, but no, we were waiting for other ships in the convoy to connect with us. I again was impressed with the number of ships around us, but our wait made us all nervous. What if enemy planes spotted us? A bunch of us sat down, and I think we figured it out. We were making the enemy believe we were going to Greece. Our ships are not headed straight for Sicily. The officers have been using the code word Husky, and we are being joined by British ships en route. One of our officers took our unit aside to show us the proposed landing on sites on the shores of Sicily. His map helped us to understand what we had been doing and where each ship was headed. We also have good intelligence where the enemy is located. Once we land here at Licata, we need to know where that enemy is. And it's pointed out that they linger away from the shore a good piece, so we might not have too much trouble. But the sea isn't any smoother. We're ready to jump overboard and swim to Sicily. Our ship is packed with everything we need for 4 or 5 days, but first we have to get on the beach. Here it is, the 10th of July, and we have arrived at the yellow beach just east of Licata. We hit the beach about 10 in the morning, glad to get off that ship. We expected to be greeted by German and Italian armies, but they didn't make it. Our maps pointed out to where we needed to go today. We leave Licata and head north and west. But first we have to make sure that Licata is all ours. All the area was softened up by our Navy. Their big guns were loud enough to awaken people in Rome, I believe. Some Rangers went ashore before light to serve as spotters for those naval gunners, and those gunners were blasting away with precision. We were assisted by a company of mortars and 105 millimeter Hausers, as well as a platoon of 75 millimeter Hausers. They landed very early. But by 11 a.m., all of us were on the beach, running for the sand dunes. We expected the Germans had set Teller mines on the beach. We were warned about landmines, so we were poking around on the sand with one eye on the horizon for the enemy and the other for an explosive. Then we found out an engineering company had swept the beach with mine detectors. The enemy had sprinkled those mines across a few places on the beach. But once we avoided those, all we had to do was cut through the barbed wire, and there was only a very little amount of that. But there was one sad moment. Our chaplain died during the landing. He was one of the first soldiers to die on the beach. To our left, beyond the cliffs, was Licata, the town of 30,000 residents, and to the right was a continuation of the soft sand we were trudging through. The sand dunes we had to climb to get off of that beach must be 100 feet high, because this harbor is a communication center with railroads and roads converging there. Some of our ships, part of the convoy, had already shelled the town pretty well, so we were ready to get off that beach, having met very little resistance. Parts of the town were completely destroyed, however. The ship's shelling had eliminated an armored train, and the older part of the town, however, was largely untouched, so life was going on pretty much as usual. We found there were several young men out there trying to clear the streets as we entered. The 2nd Battalion and the 3rd Ranger Battalion converged on the town at the same time, and we found very little fight left in them. The town had taken quite a beating. But as we moved out, we found that there were a couple of pillboxes that had to be taken care of. These are protected gun emplacements, built 2 to 3 feet thick concrete. I'll bet they're going to last for 100 years. They are so sturdy. They're hard to subdue. Usually, there are machine guns inside that keep us pinned down. As you can see, they have protected vision wherever they are located. And we noted that out east of Licata were located a good number of pillboxes as well. Atop a ridge running from the west is an old castle that overlooks the town. The rest of the land beyond is flat or rolling. Here it is, the 13th of July. We made pretty good progress on Sunday, moving quickly into the interior. We were headed up to Campobello when the Germans stepped in, but we were able to dispose of them pretty quickly. At the little town of Feverata, we expected more of the enemy. After carefully surveying the town from afar, we proceeded, but we ran up against a concealed gun emplacement, one of those dreaded pillboxes again. Our 2nd Lieutenant, Craig, crawled within 23 yards, called for cover, and then ran straight for the pillbox amongst machine gun fire on him. He finished off 3 machine gunners with his rifle, and we were on our way. Later in the day, our platoon was on a slope without any cover. The Germans had ambushed us, but Craig told us to retreat while he charged forward about 75 yards and opened fire, killing 5 enemy and wounding 3 more before an estimated 100 enemy guns killed him. We quickly returned their fire to such a degree that the Germans fled. So then we marched on to capture Ravenusa and Salmatino. Ravenusa lies in a valley surrounded by some pretty impressive peaks. We seemed to surprise the enemy. There were very few Italian companies that we met. A few of them fired rounds at us, but when we returned fire, they either surrendered or ran. I hope the press finds out what we've been doing. We then pushed on to Salmatino, a town on the hillside, like most all those towns that we've seen today. These are old towns with ancient-looking buildings and twisty, narrow streets and alleyways that are way whole lot older than our own nation is. Like many of the towns, the peasants and the townspeople greet us as heroes. Viva Babe Ruth, or Hooray Americans. Offerings of homemade wine are eagerly accepted by many of the doughboys. There is little color here except for green fields and blue skies, and the gray or the brown stone buildings. The only exceptions are the carts. These are ironclad, big, 2-wheeled carts, and many of them are carved and intricately painted, from their shafts to the ends of the gates. The scenes are from mythology or religion or even history. It's fairly easy to move over the slow-rolling hills, but that makes it very easy for the enemy to know where we are. The hilltops are perfect vantage points for the enemy on our way northward. But we found light resistance, probably because of the size of our battalion scares the daylights out of them. We hold the roads to the coast now. 21st of July, this Wednesday. I'm sorry I haven't written for so long. It's really been no time to do so. We're busy. But I thank you for your letters. I loved them. I was glad to hear about the crops, how good they look. We finally got a bit of rest, but on the 19th, we were ordered to capture Palermo in 5 days. Our commanding officer, General George S. Patton, wanted to cut off the enemy in the west from the eastern front. The road we took was not easy. Twisting and turning over hills and valleys, and Palermo is 90 miles away from Raffadali. Well, we left Raffadali, and because we're foot soldiers, there's no trucks or jeeps available for us. The trouble, of course, is at the port. They couldn't get the ships unloaded well enough and fast enough. So again, General Truscott's training comes in handy, going 5 miles an hour for the first hour, 4 miles an hour for the next hour, and then back to 5. It just goes on and on. Our feet will testify to that. We left Raffadali in the morning of the 19th. It is strange to me to see the endless line of stone buildings, houses with balconies. It is rough going in the mountainous area, the roads unpaved, so dust is always in your face and the helmet like a boiling kettle on your head. We went through some small clusters of houses, always fearful that a sniper or an angry citizen might blast one of us. We have been fortunate to have a small battalion of Moroccan gourmets with us. They are fearless fighters. They slip into the town and stab most of the people in their way, and seeing what they feel is an enemy, they shoot them. We also have another soldier who is a crack shot. He looks like a kid, he's so small. He is from Texas, growing up on a farm. I can certainly relate to him. We were about to crest a hill when the call to stop came down, and a call for Audi. He went up, saw 2 Germans riding away on horseback. He dropped to his knee, fired 2 shots, 2 bodies dropped to the ground, never moved. We went up and discovered headshots in both of them. From then on, Audie Murphy was our hero. Most of the time, groups gather at the edge of the road cheering us as we march rapidly through town. Sometimes we are able to stop and rest, and, of course, children in particular gathered around us for our chocolates that we might have. There were a couple of times when we detected an ambush was planned, but thanks to local citizenry, we turned the table on the enemy. Once we saw a white flag waving, and then a shot rang out, killing our lead soldier. We quickly surrounded the town, entered, found the building, and blew it up. Toward the end of the first day, we were ordered to take the high ground northeast of San Stefano Quisquania. No roads into that location, so it was across the mountains to try to gauge where we were. It was getting late at night, so we halted, and then we ran into some stiff resistance. The colonel ordered maximum fire, knocking out a German tank and sending the Germans running. And the Italians, they immediately surrendered. We already had so many prisoners and no place to hold them, so after interviewing them, we sent them home, because they were Sicilians. Intelligence tells us that there's no resistance left in the Italian army. We somehow made it to Corleone around 6 p.m. today. The trucks are going to be arriving tomorrow, so eventually we'll get into Palermo. The 24th of July, Saturday. Rest at last. Riding in a truck was like riding in a limo. Even the twisting and rough road were a pleasure. We were trucked from Corleone on into Palermo on the 22nd, and we immediately sent patrols into the city. We met very little resistance. In fact, by 7 p.m., city officials had surrendered the huge city. When we arrived, crowds jammed the streets, and they cheered. They all wanted to touch us in thanksgiving. I've been doing patrol duty off and on. First thing we had to do was to capture the Italian soldiers. They ran to us with their arms in the air, singing and smiling. They had a little trouble marching in a line, but we strongly encouraged it. Our unit was also tasked with making sure all their rifles were destroyed. We also had to take care of German landmines that had been stored in Palermo. But the port and water supply is carefully guarded against sabotage. Bombing that had gone on weeks before we arrived had crippled the city. The destruction seems endless. You'd have to stand here with me to believe what I saw. It seems impossible that people can even live among wreckage like this. I feel terrible when I walk by the destroyed churches, when we all need those buildings to help us through this war. So many starving people here. We try to find scraps of food to hand out. And it's always joyful to be with the people. And they gather around the families and enjoy talking to those fellow soldiers who can speak Italian. Only a few of the GIs have found descendants here in Palermo, however. It is a moving experience when it does happen, and we're all envious, making me a little depressed. Most of them were told that their descendants live in the south or to the east of Palermo. I just heard from one of the lieutenants thus far that only 57 of our men were killed, 170 wounded, and a possible 45 missing, maybe captured. But there were men who went AWOL or deserted. I know of one case where a GI was simply tired of fighting, the constant pressure to be on guard, to watch for landmines, watch for snappers, scan ahead and along the side for the glint of a machine gun barrel. It begins to take a toll on your mind. The enemy, mostly Italians, have suffered some 2,900 deaths as near as we can tell, and I know we've captured at least 53,000 of them. The enemy appears to be moving out of Sicily, crossing men and materials out across the straits there in Messina. That 2-mile gap to the toe of Italy seems to be pretty well protected, however. U-boats are swarming the straits of Messina, and anti-aircraft guns keep our bombers out of the air. There is talk our division will push them out. The highway across the north side of Sicily leads directly to Messina, and that's the path they're taking and the one we're going to have to take. But intelligence tells us the Germans are not giving up that roadway very easily. I hope they allow us more rest. Non-stop warfare is hard on us foot soldiers. Malaria has been hitting the troops, many of them. Sometimes I wish I could lie in a hospital bed for a week or so. But thankfully, my spirits were raised yesterday when the mail arrived. Loved hearing about the crops and what my nephews are doing. Send some prayers my way. It's getting hard to concentrate, and my spirits are getting pretty low. Here on the 8th, things are not going well. That road to Messina, the Germans have blanketed with ditches and the roadway with landmines. We were shipped out of Palermo on the 28th of July, headed east on this highway, 113, to relieve the 30th Infantry. One night, just east of Castel del Tusla, a medieval settlement overlooking the Mediterranean, we set up camp. Some of us walked down to the beach and enjoyed the sand and the water. What a heavenly moment when that sun started setting. The next day, we bivouacked just outside of a beautiful ancient village, Santo Stefano de Camestrada. The sea was so calm, it was relief from the squalor and the heat of Palermo. All that ended the next morning as we moved out toward San Fratello. There were Germans ahead of us on the Highway 113. We attempted to capture a bridge just west of Caronia, but the landmine field laid out to welcome us was about to be neutralized when enemy mortar and machine gun fire opened up and caused those of us who could escape to retreat out of sight, but many died. One of them was my buddy Bitar, who was killed. Say a prayer for him, please. Pillboxes, again, were a problem as well. The Jerrys are doing everything they can to hold us back. Camouflage pillboxes were plentiful as well. You never know where that next stream of machine gun fire is going to come from. Pillboxes are often connected by trenches. Many of these have blocked roads. Too many of my buddies have been killed or wounded. Death can come so fast in the war. The medics are hard-pressed to keep the injured alive. The supplies they need cannot get there fast enough. We're trying to move fast, but it has caused the medical tents and the doctors to be left behind. It was determined that we should cross the Furano River at the San Fratello Valley. The enemy artillery was so thick you could not hear someone even 10 feet away speaking. So we trudged across country rather than on the road, through thick brush and loose rock to the town of San Fratello. It was a grueling march, across deep gorges and over mountain trails so precipitous that several of the mules bearing rations and ammo lost their footing and tumbled to their death hundreds of feet below. We needed to cross the river and go back north to the enemy at Caronia, but it was slow going. 2 major minefields really slowed our movement. When we got to the river, the Germans opened up on us from San Fratello. We were forced back into cover, and most of us collapsed, exhausted, without rations or water. The next morning, we drug ourselves again through narrow gorges and over more rough terrain to attack Carolina from the east. Several of my buddies were killed as we approached, either by landmines or machine guns. We trudged along through seemingly impassable places. Blown bridges, when we did find a road, caused delays. Death was all around us. Our mortars were put up into action, and eventually the enemy slowed its shower of death. It was getting dark when we realized that they had slipped out of range and were headed east, but they planted landmines and blew up bridges to slow us. The next morning we had secretly positioned ourselves above the enemy, overlooking the river area. We and 2 other divisions started to attack, but were driven back up by any enemy armament. This went on all day until we finally seized the hill near San Fratello. From here, we could cover troops to enter town and clear it from enemy tanks and armament. It was the worst battle we had fought since landing in Sicily, but we met the enemy and sent them running. So everything that those mountains and gorges could hold us back really didn't work. Before I fall asleep, I heard that we're going to get some help from the Navy tomorrow. They will shell the escaping enemy and send the battalion behind enemy lines to attack from there. That should clear our next objective, which is St. Agatha and Brolo. War is hell. Here it is, August 11th. This is just one quick note. We're pinned down on the Naso Ridge. From here, advancing toward the Germans is going to be slow. Everything is mined, and their machine gun emplacements are up above us. I imagine they're going to use flares to illuminate our positions in the morning. Some of the men are busy setting up mortars and getting their machine guns ready in position. I'm expecting to get a call any minute to get up out of my foxhole and start firing my rifle. William Paul Chvilicek died that morning. John and Marion received this telegram telling them of his death. And there was a newspaper report that came out the next day indicating he had been killed in action on August 11th in the North Africa area. His remains were transferred to the American cemetery in Nettuno, near Anzio, Italy. His tombstone lies at the edge of the grounds. It is marked with his serial number on the back of the tombstone. I have traced as much as possible his journey as a United States soldier from the beginning of World War II until the day he died in action in North Sicily.